Ben White, a brother who drives an 18-wheeler, took on a job delivering a Buddha's head. Even though the Buddha's head was delivered safely, he became severely ill with a high fever and recurring nightmares. Upon receiving the news, I rushed to the hospital and found him in a delirious state, his scorching hands gripping mine tightly. "Jack Marlon, my Buddha's head was stolen. It's gone," he said in a low, fearful tone. "Ben, your Buddha's head was delivered just fine. It wasn't lost." I tried to reassure him, but he wouldn't let go. His wife and mother were crying beside him, and no matter what anyone said, he insisted the Buddha's head was lost. Seeing him on his last breath, I asked his boss, Noah Perry, "Where's the Buddha's body? I'll deliver it." Ben was my former employee, known for his honest and diligent nature. He learned to drive a truck largely under my guidance. After my business partner deceived me and our company went bankrupt, Ben wanted to stay with me, but I persuaded him to leave to protect him from the financial burden. Over the years, despite my heavy debt repayment schedule, I remained in contact with him. Whenever I needed help at home, Ben would always be the first to come. Noah Perry, an old acquaintance of mine, heard that I was willing to take on the remaining job and he felt relieved. "Jack, if you're willing to take this trip, I'll cover the gas, and all the returns will be yours." Ben's wife excused herself to talk to me in the hospital corridor. "Jack, Ben got sick in a strange way. When they left, they had both the Buddha's head and body, but only Ben returned." I frowned, feeling that Noah, as an experienced driver, should have known the rules of transporting a Buddha. These modular Buddha statues require simultaneous departure and arrival, and even stopping for a restroom break is considered a taboo. When Noah told me that only the Buddha's head arrived and not the body, I thought the temple might have some special requirements. Ben's wife wiped away tears and continued. "Ben wasn't himself when he returned that night. He said he got into a minor car accident, but it wasn't serious. I told him to rest, but by midnight, he had a fever and kept talking nonsense. He's been in the hospital for 2 days, and they still can't find the cause of his illness." Ben's wife is also a kind-hearted person. When my wife was ill in the hospital, she often came to help me take care of things. After comforting her, I went to Noah's company with him. On the way, Noah told me the truth. The man who accompanied Ben in transporting the Buddha was Ryan Waters, a cousin from Noah's hometown, who had only been working for half a year and was eager to make money. No one expected that Ryan would suddenly demand more money midway and turn back with the Buddha's body. The most taboo thing when transporting Buddhas is taking a detour or turning back, especially with only part of the statue. When we arrived at Noah's company, there was a commotion at the entrance. Several drivers were tussling with a tall young man, Ryan Waters. "Ryan, stop struggling. This isn't something you can handle now. Wait for Mr. Perry to return and discuss it then." Ryan replied, "It's just delivering a shipment. What can't be handled?" As soon as Noah saw Ryan, he became angry and rushed towards him. "Ryan, are you showing off? I should have told you to go back home. Who asked you to come?" Ryan looked wronged. "We're family. My mom asked him to take care of me, but he gives others more than twice what he gives me. Isn't this unfair?" I entered the company behind Noah, and people like Mark Johnson greeted me as someone they knew. After Mark brought over a seat for me, I asked him to show me the vehicles. Ryan and his companions followed behind, whispering to each other. "Jack Marlon is here," Mark introduced. "He's been in this line over 10 years, used to lead convoys for blessings, and isn't afraid of anything strange." "Nonsense," Ryan said firmly. "What's so strange? It's all about the money." "Shut up." Noah turned around and glared at him. Once inside the yard, I saw the vehicle that was supposed to transport the Buddha's body. This statue was so large that some parts of the route had height restrictions, making it difficult to transport all at once. The statue was divided into upper and lower parts, both covered in red cloth and positioned on the vehicle. The vehicle was also decorated with red cloth and had clearly been washed. "Jack, see if anything is missing. I'll provide whatever is needed. Let's stick to the previous agreement. All costs are mine, and all returns are yours." As soon as Ryan heard this, he rushed forward to get into the driver's seat, but I pulled him down. "Get the hell out. This car is mine. When did it become yours?" Noah was about to get physical, but I restrained him. Ryan still looked resentful. "Why can't I go? I didn't lose the car. I can just deliver it again. Plus, my mom will call you soon." As soon as Noah heard about his family, his face darkened. I asked Ryan. You were already on the road. Why did you suddenly want more money? If you weren't satisfied with your commission, why didn't you say so before departing? Ryan explained that at a service station that afternoon, he overheard someone saying he had the lowest commission, which led him to demand more money. Everyone was stunned by this. Mark Johnson said, "How did the people at the service station know about our company's commissions? Even if they're in the same line of work, they wouldn't know that much." Ryan claimed he didn't see the person's face but only heard his voice. Someone wondered if Ben might have said something, but another person countered, "Ben wouldn't fabricate such stories. Besides, his voice is unmistakable." Noah hesitated and looked at me, suggesting, "Jack, should I contact the temple to see if we can delay it a couple of days?" I shook my head. "I'll head home for a shower and leave tonight. Ben's still in the hospital, and he's worried about the Buddha's head." "Isn't that an all-night drive?" Noah seemed even more uncertain. "There's no need to fear night roads when delivering a Buddha. Just light 2 yellow lanterns." I looked up at the Buddha's body on the vehicle. "Besides, human lives are at stake, and Buddha will protect me." In the end, I asked Noah to prepare a bundle of incense and a bowl of multicolored rice, items my old master always told me to bring when transporting Buddhas. Noah decided to let Mark Johnson accompany me. Although Mark was afraid, he didn't refuse. I decided to bring Ryan along since he was the one who brought the Buddha's body back. At 7 o'clock that evening, the 3 of us set off. 2 small yellow lanterns hung from the rearview mirrors. In the past, the lanterns used temple incense, but now they used small battery-powered bulbs. These bulbs weren't very bright, and from a distance, they looked like 2 fireflies flickering. Mark drove first and I rested in the back seat. Ryan sat in the passenger seat. Perhaps thinking I was asleep, he lowered his voice. "Uncle Noah really gives him all the returns, huh? So we're basically doing this for nothing," Ryan complained. Mark responded with some resignation. "The boss wouldn't cheat us out of this much, would he? You should be grateful Jack took this job. Otherwise, we'd be unsure of how to wrap things up." Ryan let out a dismissive snort, looking dissatisfied. "He's not just some big deal because he's rushed through a few dangerous routes. Anyone can do those. I've asked around, and he was cheated out of his company and now does odd jobs to pay debts. You all call him Jack with such respect." Mark shot Ryan a cold look through the rearview mirror. "Do you know what happened to the person who cheated him? That guy died on his first attempt at rushing through those routes. In the end, Jack was the one who successfully opened that route." Ryan froze, unsure of how to respond. His expression still showed defiance, but Mark could only shake his head in frustration. I fell asleep in the back seat, and in my dream, I was walking alone on a deserted highway. There were no cars or people around, just silence. I kept walking forward, hearing only my footsteps. At some point, another set of footsteps joined mine. I turned sharply and saw a man with half his face disfigured standing outside the highway barrier. He stared directly at me with one leg raised, as if trying to step over. I recognized him as Reginald Davis, the partner who betrayed me and had been a friend since childhood. "Jack Marlon, I won't let you off easily," Reginald's hoarse voice echoed, "forever trapped on that highway. You can't cross over." I looked at him coldly. He fixed his eyes on me and suddenly opened his mouth in a grotesque smile, stretching his neck like a snake to clear the barrier and rush towards me. My hand instinctively reached for my waist, and a hard, cold object pressed into my palm. I opened my eyes to find my hand still clutching the sacred whip wrapped around my waist. The dream dissipated, and the slightly swaying ceiling of the car came into focus. The sacred whip was given to me by a crazed old Taoist when I was a child. He said I had a demon general appearance with a Buddha's heart, destined to make a living from the spiritual realm. Turned out just like he predicted. I've been driving trucks to clear spiritual paths, using this whip to ward off evil spirits. Even though I'm in my 30s, I'm still relying on these ghost jobs to pay off debts. Unexpectedly, I dreamed about Reginald Davis again. He's been dead for almost half a year. "Jack, are you awake?" Mark suddenly asked. I quickly sat up and checked the time, finding it was already past 10 at night. The traffic on the road had significantly diminished. "Are we near a rest stop? I'll take over driving soon," I told Mark. Mark nodded, trying to take out a cigarette but missed it. That's when I noticed his hand was trembling slightly. "What's wrong?" I asked him. Mark hesitated, his voice shaking slightly. "Jack, why are there so many people stopping the car tonight?" I leaned over to look out the window and saw people standing along the road, about 10 meters apart. They weren't stopping smaller cars or buses, but they would raise their hands as we approached. This stretch of road wasn't a highway, and the lighting was poor, so we couldn't see their faces at all. Ignore them. Just keep driving steadily until we reach the rest stop, I advised Mark. Mark gripped the steering wheel tightly, not daring to loosen his grip. Shortly, Ryan, who had also fallen asleep, woke up and looked out the window with a confused expression. Wow, why are there so many people? Is there a tourist spot around here? Mark and I didn't respond to Ryan. We focused on watching the road. Ryan observed for a bit, then suddenly grabbed the door handle. My whip at my waist reacted, and Ryan had already opened the door. I immediately grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back sharply, closing the door with a thud. Ryan twisted his neck to look at me, his eyes locked on mine. Let them get in! Mark let out a startled scream, and the car skidded. Hold the steering wheel, I shouted at Mark, then dragged Ryan to the back seat. Ryan growled and tried to grab my neck, but I pinned him against the seat and whipped him with the sacred whip. The whip landed on his hand, and he cried out in pain, clutching his hand and collapsing onto the seat. I moved to the front passenger seat and looked outside the window. There was a layer of dust stuck to the glass, making it hard to see the road. I gripped the whip tightly and knocked on the window twice, and the dust suddenly cleared. The car quickly passed another person trying to stop us. In the rearview mirror, that person turned stiffly, seeming to follow us with their gaze. Mark pulled out some tissues to wipe the sweat from his face. Ryan was still lying in the back, occasionally whimpering softly. I turned on the radio and stumbled upon a broadcast of Journey to the West. The host's voice was strange, as if someone was pinching their throat, making it high-pitched. It says Monkey King was pressed under the Five-Finger Mountain for 500 years, and on this day. Ah! Mark suddenly shouted, and the car jolted as if it had run over something. Jack! I think I hit someone. Mark was about to pull over, but I stopped him with a slap on the back. A following SUV swerved to avoid us and horned twice. You're crazy. There's no one. The road behind us was empty, and I had been keeping an eye on the front. Mark breathed heavily, his hands shaking on the wheel. The car jolted again. Jack! Mark exclaimed. It's okay, stay calm, I said, pressing on Mark's shoulder. We're almost at the service area. We'll switch places when we arrive. Mark nodded hastily, sweat dripping down his clothes. The radio continued broadcasting Journey to the West, the host's voice even more shrill. Let's talk about the saint from the east, a reincarnation of the golden cicada, with 10 lifetimes of merits. As he journeyed westward, he inevitably attracted the envy of evil spirits and ghouls. We finally reached the service area. As we approached, those people who had been stopping us vanished. Just past midnight, the service area's parking lot was lit up, making the surroundings feel safer. We all got out of the car, and Mark and Ryan were visibly shaken, their legs trembling. I told them to go buy some food and use the restroom while I guarded the vehicle. Once they left, I walked around the truck. The vehicle didn't seem to have any damage, but the rear guardrail was covered in strange, dark marks resembling handprints and claw marks, twisted and ferocious. I found a white towel, dampened it, and wiped away all the marks. The Buddha statue, still covered in red cloth, sat properly on the vehicle. Hey, looks like you guys are delivering a Buddha in the dead of night, someone suddenly said from behind. Turning around, I saw a couple of workers in blue uniforms. Right? I replied calmly. We're delivering at night to arrive early in the morning. You guys are really struggling. We're cooking noodles here. Come join us for a bite, they suggested. Their truck was parked diagonally across from us, with a portable electric pot beside it, and the aroma of noodles wafted over. I shook my head. No thanks. The people in our vehicle are buying snacks too. Just then, Mark emerged from behind their truck and waved at me. Jack, all the food stalls are closed. Let's just eat a bit with them, Mark said. The workers also smiled and invited me over. It's tough being away from home. Let's share a meal. I frowned at Mark, who was now intently waiting for noodles with a bowl in hand. His fearful demeanor from earlier had vanished. No need, you guys eat. I'm not hungry, I said, continuing to wipe down the vehicle. The workers just stood there without moving. When I finally stopped and turned around, they suddenly seemed normal again, returning to their meal. I finished wiping the car and went back to the car door, sitting on the step. That's when I realized how eerily quiet the service area was. Despite the bright floodlights in the parking lot, the surrounding buildings were mostly dark. The few parked cars looked as if they were covered in dust. Mark was enjoying the noodles with those workers, bowl after bowl, his mouth moving nonstop. However, there was no sign of Ryan, who was supposed to be with Mark. Just as I was thinking about this, a figure suddenly darted out from beside the road. It was Ryan. His face was pale and he stumbled towards me. "Jack, Uncle Zhang is gone." I almost couldn't get back. If I hadn't seen the yellow lanterns on our vehicle, I would have gotten lost by the restroom. Ryan was clearly terrified, and before I could say anything, he continued in a rapid-fire tone. "Something's off here, Jack." I went to the restroom, and there were no lights. Everything was broken and messy. "I'm telling you, this isn't the service area we went to before. We must have come to the wrong one." I covered Ryan's mouth and gestured for him to look back. On the other side, Mark was eating noodles with those workers, who stood upright and motionless, staring at us. Their truck had changed. It was now rusty, with broken windows. Ryan's legs buckled, and he almost fell to the ground. I grabbed Ryan's arm and whispered, "Go get Mark and tell him we're leaving. If he doesn't come back, drag him back." Ryan's voice was hoarse and trembling. "Jack? I'm scared, Jack." I pushed him gently, and he steeled himself to approach Mark. I pulled out my sacred whip and slowly stood up. At that moment, the floodlights illuminating the parking lot began to flicker wildly. Ryan let out a terrified scream and sprinted over to Mark, yanking him away. I leaped into the driver's seat just before the lights went out entirely and started the car, turning on the headlights. With the lights on, at least we could see the road ahead. The workers beside the truck had vanished. Ryan ran back screaming, dragging Mark, who was staring straight ahead with his mouth drooling. I leaned over to pull Mark into the car, and Ryan followed. As they tried to close the door, Ryan shrieked again because someone's hand was caught in it. "Never mind. Both of you get to the back," I said. They were both large men, but my whip was too short to fully extend. Luckily, young Ryan mustered some strength and dragged Mark into the back, squeezing in beside him. I whipped the pale hand outside, then slammed the door shut. There was a fierce pounding on the car door, someone shouting, "Open the door! I haven't gotten in yet. Open up!" The voice was startlingly similar to Mark's, making Ryan shiver and cast an uncomprehending glance at Mark. I floored the gas, and the voice suddenly stopped. The car took off, and we realized that this wasn't a functioning service area but an abandoned parking lot. I turned around to leave the parking lot, and Mark in the back seat convulsed again. His stomach was swelling as if he was about to vomit but couldn't. I looked at him through the rearview mirror and saw his face turning green. "Do we have liquor in the car?" I asked. Ryan, scared to the point of shaking, eventually replied, "Liquor? Yeah, we have some. Find it and give it to Uncle Zhang. Let's make him drink. Then give him a bag so he can vomit." "Okay." Ryan rummaged through the seats and pulled out 2 bottles of baijiu. Although drinking and driving is prohibited, truckers often keep some alcohol in their vehicles for emergencies. Mark drank 2 bottles of baijiu and finally started vomiting as we got onto the highway. The abandoned parking lot was left far behind, shrouded in darkness and an eerie atmosphere. When we exited, I took a good look around. Many cars in the area were damaged vehicles with visible dents and scratches. It was surprising because the area was brightly lit when we arrived, yet now it showed no signs of being a service area. After Mark finished vomiting, he slumped in the back seat, half closing his eyes. He looked like he was sleeping, and his complexion had improved slightly. However, the stuff he vomited was thick, black water with a foul odor. We kept the car windows open for a while to ventilate the vehicle. I drove for over an hour without encountering any more roadblocks or strange occurrences. Ryan remained quiet, probably because the silence in the cabin had dragged on too long. He cautiously asked, "Jack, have you ever encountered such things when taking these kinds of jobs before?"
No, irraplia frankly.
"I've never done a delivery where only part of the Buddha statue was transported." Ryan seemed taken aback by my response, remaining silent for a while before whispering, "Was the person in the restroom at the service area trying to trick me?" I couldn't confirm, so I just advised him, "Think things through before acting. In this line of work, being too impulsive can be deadly." Ryan nodded, shrinking back into his seat. At this point, it seemed like a car accident had occurred ahead, with 2 flattened cars blocking the road. "What's going on? Can't we move?" Ryan was anxious to reach the destination as quickly as possible, feeling unsafe on the dark highway. However, a few traffic officers in yellow vests were directing us to stop. I pulled over to the side, lowering the window. "The road needs to be cleared, and we can't pass for now," one of the officers explained. Another officer approached. "What's your cargo?" I handed him the transportation contract, but he barely glanced at it before heading to the rear of the vehicle. "We need to inspect. Please cooperate." I found the officer's attitude odd, especially since there was still a car accident scene behind them. However, random inspections on the road aren't uncommon, so I decided to comply. Just as I was about to get out of the car, I reflexively checked the rearview mirror. The yellow lantern hung below it caught my attention. In the mirror, the officer walking towards the rear was wearing a blue uniform, just like the workers at the rest stop, instead of the expected yellow reflective vest. I quickly locked the car door. Looking out again, the officers didn't have normal uniforms. They lacked badges, and their sleeve patches were just color blocks. The cars blocking the road didn't look like they had just been in an accident either. They were clearly old wrecks. "Hey, please get out and cooperate with the investigation." One officer pounded on my door. I looked at him coldly, reaching for the ignition. The officer noticed my movement and suddenly climbed onto my car window, trying to squeeze in. As his face entered the cabin, it became charred. Ryan, who had been observing quietly, was startled into a scream, even waking up the dazed Mark. I pulled out my sacred whip and gave the creature a lash on the head. It wailed and fell from the window. I quickly started the car and swerved to bypass the wreckage, scratching the front. In the rearview mirror, the officers vanished. However, my car suddenly sagged as if something had climbed aboard. I recalled Ben's frantic grip on my hand, insisting someone had stolen the Buddha's head. Ben's wife had also told me about his car being damaged in a similar manner. There was a strange parallel between our experiences. "Jack, what's going on? Were those fake cops?" Ryan's voice trembled as if he were about to cry. Mark, seemingly having heard something, widened his eyes. "Jack, there seems to be something behind us." I looked through the rearview mirror and saw the red cloth covering the Buddha statue fluttering. A dilapidated truck followed closely, its headlights blinking. Amid the flashes, I saw it was carrying a Buddha's head without the usual red veil, facing backwards on the dark highway. It looked like a severed head floating in midair. When transporting a Buddha, the head must be veiled with red cloth and face the front of the vehicle. But on this truck, the Buddha's head was unveiled and oriented towards the rear, creating an unsettling image. "Damn!" I cursed, pushing the gas pedal almost to the floor, but the car's speed was decreasing. It felt as if something was pushing against us from all sides. "Jack, what do we do?" Both Ryan and Mark noticed the car slowing down, and the rustling sounds from behind grew louder. "Mark, come up front." "Ryan, get the multicolored rice and light the incense." Mark quickly moved to the front passenger seat, helping me hold the steering wheel. I lowered the window and whipped the air with my lash, causing a series of sharp cracks that echoed far away. The car picked up speed, but the resistance remained. "Jack," Ryan called out in a tearful voice, "the incense won't light." "Give it to me," I said. Mark took the incense from Ryan and muttered prayers while trying to light it with a lighter. This time, the incense ignited successfully. Ryan handed over the bowl of multicolored rice, but just as Mark inserted the incense, all 3 sticks snapped in half. Mark's face turned white. "Let me do it," I said, letting Mark help with the steering wheel while I placed the incense bowl on the driver's seat. As soon as I lit the incense, smoke enveloped me, and to my astonishment, a dark human head appeared before me, blowing a gust of air towards my incense. Enraged, I seized the incense sticks and thrust them into the head's sunken eyes. Ryan and Mark seemed not to have seen the head. They only watched as I suddenly grabbed the incense and stabbed it into the air. The incense burned out instantly, turning to ash that fell from midair. "Jack, what's going on?" Mark shouted, startled. "It's fine," I replied, patting off the ash on my hand. "Get me 3 more." This time, I successfully inserted the incense, but it burned extremely fast. I asked Mark and Ryan to keep an eye on it. Once the incense was gone, we would replace it immediately. As we did this, the truck behind us slowed, and the Buddha's head on it gradually turned towards us. The multicolored rice and incense were meant to invoke Buddha's protection during unusual situations, but this time was different due to the incomplete Buddha statue. Outside, everything had turned a grayish hue. The car was almost unable to move. I rolled down the window again, but just as I was about to whip out, I realized my arm couldn't move. Using the faint light from the yellow lanterns, I saw numerous small black hands grasping my arm. "Jack, the incense is gone." Mark's voice cracked, though we had plenty of incense sticks. Many had been broken due to his trembling hands. The Buddha's head on the truck behind us was almost fully turned now. We weren't far from the temple. I decided to make a final push. I bit my tongue, spitting out a mouthful of blood, which released my arm. I took the incense bowl from Mark, flung it out the window, and a whirlwind of rice and ash swept across the dark highway. I seized the momentary distraction to floor the gas and speed forward. The dilapidated truck that had been pursuing us hadn't been shaken off. It quickly caught up. Our tires were once again stuck, and there was a dry scraping sound from the road. For a moment, I saw those workers in blue uniforms standing by the road, waving at us. My steering wheel suddenly lost control, and the car veered towards the roadside, heading for a collision. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, but couldn't stabilize the vehicle. Mark covered his head in despair. "It's over, Jack." Just then, a resonant, heavy bell echoed from the nearby mountain, a temple's bell tolling in the distance. The bell rang at dawn, although the sky was still dark. As the car was about to crash into the barrier, I forcefully turned the wheel, and the vehicle swerved back onto course. The screech of the brakes filled the air, and we came to a stop. The temple bells continued to ring, their sound sweeping across the highway. Once we regained our composure, the sky had started to lighten. I stepped out of the car and saw nothing except the evident brake marks on the ground. The Buddha's body was still properly seated on the vehicle, covered with red cloth. We delivered the Buddha to the temple at 6 that morning, walking under the rising sun. The temple's receptionist and the abbot, Aaron Mayer, received us. After the Buddha's body was placed in the hall, I asked Master Mayer about the early bell tolling. He explained that the resident had ordered the bells to ring an hour earlier because the driver who delivered the Buddha's head was ill, and the temple wanted to pray for him. I thanked the temple on behalf of Ben and lit some incense as well. Before leaving, I was still somewhat uneasy and asked Master Mayer discreetly if there had been any issues with the delivered Buddha's head. I mentioned that we had burned incense for Ben along the way but felt it wasn't enough, especially since I remembered that the Buddha's head on the other truck hadn't fully turned towards us in the end. Master Mayer smiled and said, "The donor's kindness is in his heart. The incense is already sufficient, so how could it be lacking?" On the way back, I received a call from Ben's wife. She said Ben's fever had subsided, and he was now conscious, although he couldn't recall anything about delivering the Buddha's head. He mentioned that whenever he was delirious, he could smell the incense from the temple. Mark was exhausted on the return trip. Ryan, however, was energized and meticulously checked the cargo area to ensure it was empty before departing. We completed the return journey smoothly, with Ryan driving steadily without needing me to take over. As we approached home, I leaned against the passenger window and vaguely saw a familiar figure standing by the highway's railing. Someone who looked like Reginald Davis.